Hello everyone, I'm Aaron, a birding naturalist, and I just recently finished this book, The Backyard Bird Chronicles, written and illustrated by Amy Tan. I want to share some thoughts. So Amy Tan is a famous fiction writer, but this book is a little different. This is a foray into birds and birding, in particular backyard birding. In it, she brings us into her home, into her dining room, and into her yard, where she often sits and reads and writes and is able to watch the feeders that she has in her backyard. It's a kind of interesting journey over the course of this book because she's a new birder and she embraces that. So she sits and writes and observes what's going on in her backyard, and she keeps a journal. She keeps notes, daily entries of her life, including the birds that she sees in her backyard. And what this book is a collection of excerpts from that journal that all relate to the birds that she sees. It starts in 2016 and goes through 2022. And like I said, it's just sort of interesting snippets and pieces of a backyard birder's journal. That time frame has some interesting stuff. You know, it shows kind of where she started birding and kind of how far she's gotten, the things that she's learned. It spans the pandemic, and she talks about her reactions to birds and birding and the comfort and solace that she gets to a certain extent from the birds in her backyard when everything was shut down during the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's an interesting piece. I also really like the way that it's formatted with these journal entries because, like I mentioned, it does sort of show a progression. You know, she learns things. She becomes a more nuanced bird observer over the course of these pages. She also, very impressively, illustrates these things. So there are, and I like the illustrations for sort of a variety of other reasons. One, some of them are beautiful. I'll try to find a good example quickly here. I mean, for example, that scrub jay is lovely. Nice American crow. Sort of a Corbett page here. And it's cool because she has some images like that are really refined, really sort of polished. But she's also got images more like this, kind of a quick, rougher sketch. But still, you know, some notes, some details, some observations of what the birds are doing, the behaviors. And then she has other sketches like this, sort of much more basic. And I actually think that that's really cool to watch, or to be able to see, to be able to be invited in to an artist's process, to see what a first sketch looks like, and then what sort of a more refined sketch looks like, and then what a much more polished, sort of finished drawing looks like with color and everything like that. So the fact that Amy Tan includes all of those in her book, I really appreciate. I think it's a really nice feature. I also really like the kind of friendly casualness of the journal entries. You know, they're certainly focused on birds and the birds that she's seeing in her backyard and what they're doing, but she also, you know, includes other aspects of her life that surround the birds in her backyard. She talks about her partner. She talks about her dog. She talks about her living room and dining room. And you get a sense of kind of being included in her life a little bit, which I think is a really nice level of familiarity. There are a couple things that I'm not wild about. She talks once or twice about kind of the deeper meanings of some bird observations. The most prominent one that I can think of is, at one point over the course of the book, she has a close friend who passes away, and she's of course sad about this. And then shortly thereafter, she has a few unusual observations of birds, like rare birds showing up in her yard. And she kind of sort of makes a connection between like the loss and like maybe that rare bird is connected to that. She also then says she doesn't really think those connections exist, but then she kind of leaves those connections in place anyway. I don't know. It kind of gets under my skin a little bit. If you know that there aren't connections between the death of one person and a rare bird showing up in your yard, then just don't make the connection. Another thing she does occasionally is kind of anthropomorphize the birds in her yard. She kind of ascribes human emotions to the birds and what they're doing and how they're behaving. And she acknowledges that from sort of a scientific perspective, that's often not a great idea, because we really don't know what is happening in the mind of another animal, especially one that you can't like verbally talk to. And so she acknowledges like we shouldn't anthropomorphize animals too much, but then she kind of does it anyway. So again, it's just one of those things that kind of gets under my skin a little bit. If you know it's not a good idea, just don't subscribe human emotions to non-human animals. But both those types of occurrence, they're pretty few and far between. They aren't like a major issue. There's a little something that bugged me a bit. Overall, I thought the book is a really charming, really wonderful way of looking at birds. I think it's one of these books that really glorifies the everyday in birding. You know, it's not all about those rare birds. The individual birds, the great horned owl that she has in her backyard that she watches grow up from a young bird into a more adulthood. That's a really neat connection to make. Just being there, seeing the same bird over and over and over again. Like I said, it's not rare. That's not the value. There's value in finding rare birds. That's going to be a lot of fun. It can be really cool. But there's also a lot of value in just learning the birds around you and getting to know your kind of neighbors. The sort of idea of developing a sit spot or hyper-local birding or slow birding. These are ideas that I really like and that Amy Tan really exemplifies very well in her book. And so I really think that's very cool of her. So I think if you like birds, if you like backyard birding, if you have birds in your backyard and you kind of want to see how other people interact with the birds in their backyards, and if you're a new birder or an experienced birder, I think there's lots to be gained from reading this book. It's a charming, fun read. And so I would definitely recommend picking up a copy. Yeah. And also definitely enjoy the artwork as well. If you've read this book, let me know down in the comments what you thought. What are the pros? What are the cons? And also, if you're reading any other books about birds or science or nature, let me know in the comments about that as well. I'm always on the lookout for new titles to explore, and would definitely love to find out what you're reading and maybe point me in a new direction. So as always, thank you very much for the view. Until next time, enjoy the natural world.